This video and all other videos on this channel are for entertainment purposes only. The content of this video and all other videos on this channel are the opinions of the creator only and do not constitute legal, trading, investment, or financial advice of any kind. Investing carries a high level of risk and the majority of retail clients lose money. Do not invest any capital unless you understand the risks and you are prepared to lose it all. Alright, hello and welcome to Camel Finance. I'm your boy Camel and welcome to the week. Welcome to Monday. Today I want to point at a few last ditch efforts here to maintain my own personal optimism and bullishness around Bitcoin. I just want to show you how late we are in this cycle now and the path that I'm cheering on. And then I also have to cover gold. And then of course we'll look at a few charts and TA at the end, some live positions as always, ready for the week ahead. First things first, I wanted to open with this as a bit of a joke, right? I asked Grok to generate me some Camel Finance video, and it said it couldn't do that, but it could give me a script. And I'll let you pause your screen and read this right here, but I'm sure I never said this, okay? I'm pretty sure I never said this, but anyway, getting into today's episode, here's the most bullish scenario that I can see for Bitcoin. It's not very nice to admit this. We have used up the timing for this 4-year cycle. There's only 2 weekly cycles left before the next 4-year cycle low is due, and we should expect, therefore, left translation in this current weekly cycle to produce a top. The only real question is that top going to be at new all-time highs or a lower high, which would of course confirm the sneaky kind of distribution, institutional, quiet rollover, no greed, no FOMO, no euphoria. And in either case, once this cycle left translates, it will begin the decline to enter a bear market. So what does that look like? Well, we're in the process of working out and confirming a weekly cycle low at the moment. It could go a bit lower first and it might be in already. We don't know. There's no way of knowing. We just need to wait for this thing to confirm and start to push. And then hopefully in the bullish scenario, as per my yellow squiggle, we can get a big blow off top left translated all-time high, and then we can start the declining portion of this 4-year cycle. And as you can see, there's only 2 weekly cycles left until that 4-year cycle low becomes due. And the other alternative idea is that we're going to eke out this weekly cycle low, make either a lower high or a marginal higher high, and then roll over again. And then the rest of this path will probably be the same. And this whole thing would have just been that sneaky institutional top that we've been talking about more and more on this channel. So remember, if you're unfamiliar with cycles, left translation is defined as a top to the left-hand side of the halfway point, aka the midpoint of this cycle. So since these cycles are about 6 months apart for a weekly cycle, that tells us we should be eking out a top before about the 3-month mark measured from wherever this lowest low is once it's confirmed. So I think we're on borrowed time here, and I think zoomed out when you look at this and have the context of only being 2 weekly cycles away from a 4-year cycle low, I think it's pretty difficult to maintain large degrees of bullishness here. I know there's a lot of narrative that's convincing, right? Ending QT, rate cuts are coming, haven't seen blow off top and euphoria and greed yet, amongst a whole heap of other ones that you can choose to latch onto. But as a cycle trader, this is what I know to be true. I know we are just 2 weekly cycles away. And that doesn't mean we can't cheer on this blow off top left translation. It also doesn't mean that we couldn't see much higher numbers. Anything and everything is possible. A double from here would put us at 200k. So I'm not discounting that. And 200k 3-month or less window, whilst it seems crazy, it's certainly not impossible. We've seen Bitcoin do over 100% in that same time frame, multiple times this cycle alone. So much higher numbers are definitely on the cards, but the one thing I think we really have to be aware of is if we do just kind of move up here, lackluster bounce, either a lower high or a marginal higher high or even a triple top or whatever, and then start to head to the downside, then we're going to have real problems on our hands, because by the time we get into the end of this year and early next year, then it's pretty much over, right? We have used up all of this time by that stage, and all that's left is a declining portion of the cycle. So this is the final 3 months here, and the big question is, are we going to see those all-time highs or not? As ever, no one knows, right? And we'll just keep taking it one day at a time. We've done pretty well with having that attitude the entire way up. No one knows, we'll take it one day at a time. And even when we were suspecting this cycle would left translate in here, okay, looking something more like this, big blow off top and then extended bear market decline, we proved that you could be flat wrong on an idea like I was with left translation and still stay on trend, right? Still follow a system, still extract money from the market, still yet to have sold a single sat. As ever, it's not about being right or wrong, it's about staying on the right side of the trade. But the only way we can do that is to continuously accept we have no control over this, right? We have to relinquish control. We don't know what's going to happen. And right now, we just have to continue to let the cycles guide us. But just like they've been guiding us on the way up here, it's soon going to be time to accept that they're going to start to guide us on the way down. I think Bob Lucas is seeing a quite similar idea here. He said that stocks have dipped the past week after a very extended run. We're more than overdue for a 3 to 6 week sentiment clearing decline, which if I pull up an S&P 500 chart, you can see right here, right? Weekly cycle low, we've had a bunch of cycles. We're now in that window to see a weekly cycle decline. And ordinarily, as I was showing the members over the weekend, right, even this would be considered just a 2-week decline. This was just 2 weeks. That would be considered quite a short amount of time to reset a weekly cycle, as was this, also 2 weeks. That would also
also be considered quite a short amount of time to reset the cycle. Normally we would look for at least 3 weeks and maybe more to fully flush and reset a weekly cycle. And if we were to get one of these 3 to 6 week sentiment clearing, typical, normal and to be expected weekly cycle resets in the stocks, that would of course set up a new cycle that could sustain a push into Q1. But last week, the stocks showed fight late in the week and again continue to push, at least based on the futures prices at the moment. So if we keep pushing from here to all-time highs and we spend very little time here resetting the cycle, especially during a government shutdown, then it's not really fundamentals that are driving this space anymore. It's pure speculative animal spirits. This would be, as I've been coining it, late stage cycle stuff and real blow off top moments. And this move would therefore become a significant outlier and a signal that a runaway market is headed for a Q4 cyclical top. At least that's Bob's take. It's my take too, right? Let's really simplify what we're saying here. If this is going to behave as a normal cycle, we would need a good few weeks to flush and reset the cycle, and then we could go again. And if so, that reset right here will set us up for the Q1 top or a run at least into Q1 of next year. But if what we see is that's all it took to reset the weekly cycle and now we're just going to blast higher from here, then we can only conclude that that's a blow off top. And if we're having a blow off top like that, then it's not likely to be sustained into 2026. Instead, it's much more likely that our base case expectation on this channel at the moment, which is that we'll see a top this year, but probably before Christmas, becomes even more validated, right? It becomes even more likely, especially if we have just reset the entire weekly cycle in what was essentially one daily candle. To zoom out a little bit here and give more context, this is how close we are to the 4-year cycle low at the moment. Similarly to Bitcoin, we have used up the time. And just like Bitcoin, there's about 2 more weekly cycles here for the S&P before we are therefore due to find a 4-year cycle low. So again, you can see the theme of today. We are on borrowed time here. Doesn't mean we can't go much higher in terms of price. It doesn't mean we can't see major upside for the next kind of 8 to 12 weeks. And I think we will. But it just means by the time we get there, we're going to have left translated these weekly cycles, confirmed we are well and truly in blow off tops, and it will be time to start to use the following 2 weekly cycle lows to chain together to give bearish action and find those 4-year cycle lows. So if you're a Q1 or Q2 guy, if you're cheering on an extended, lengthened bull phase of this 4-year cycle, you really need to see us consolidate here and take a breather. Otherwise, if we start to rip, then we are probably going to be topping before Christmas and we are going to start to target those 4-year cycle lows next year. And again, it's the same deal for Bitcoin as I said earlier, right? Blow off top if we're lucky, and then we can target the 4-year cycle low. Worst case scenario, lackluster bounce, and then that sets up this kind of rollover. And as if we needed an excuse, right? We have now got potentially a catalyst. The Fed is going to host a conference tomorrow focused on Bitcoin and crypto payments. So nothing again has to happen, remember. It just has to convince the market something's going to happen, and then they'll start to forward price that and look forward to much higher prices. So some kind of strategic reserve talk, or making Bitcoin tax free, or making a rule change so that you don't get taxed if you spend it, something like that would be enough for animal spirits to get fired up and start to really push these markets to new highs. And again, it would fit the whole idea that we're in this final stage of the 4-year cycles. It would probably look something like this, a vertical lockout rally here that most people don't believe is possible. And again, it should all be done inside of 3 months or less, because that's how long half of the weekly cycle should take. Moving over to gold at the moment, we know for a while people have been queuing up every day to top tick gold. It's not just in Australia, it's in various other places around the world. People want to buy and sell. And this is very much what you'd expect to see at a speculative FOMO mania bubble. What's the probability that all of these people bought the 8-year cycle low and are now getting ready to take profit? Right, pretty low. Let's be honest. When Joe Average behaves like this, it's normally because they're top ticking a parabola. And of course, that's what we've got for gold. We've got a big parabola at the moment. Now, as somebody that's been extremely vocal about saying I thought the whole M2 90-day offset thing was BS, right? I thought it was cherry-picked data. I then threw this out here as an idea. Look, I tagged this guy in it because it wasn't even my idea. It was Robert's idea that we could offset gold by 90 days. And it turns out Bitcoin follows it relatively well. Now, it was pretty interesting that I can post all kinds of things on Twitter and most people don't really get wound up by much. But for some reason, this really triggered a handful of people. So I'm not sure if that tells us anything, but I wanted to touch on this again just because a lot of people seem to not really understand it. So if you ask me, obviously nothing ever tracks 1-to-1. But they bottom roughly the same time, they move up roughly the same time, they move down roughly the same time. Most of the highs match. This low formed slightly ahead of this low, but they did roughly speaking bottom at the same time. They rally up to top at the same time. There was a period of divergence here in the middle, wherein Bitcoin trades down for a little while, whilst gold was trading up for a little while, okay? But then rather quickly, you can see the lows form almost at the same time here. Consolidate together, they move up together, they top together, they bottom within a few days of each other, then they continue to run higher together. Again, up here, they top and consolidate roughly at exactly the same time. And then by the time we get here, right, gold basically does this higher low and explodes higher to go totally parabolic, as you can see right here. And so I was just simply suggesting that maybe we Dalai Lama our way out of here for Bitcoin, right? Let's use this pen instead. Maybe we do something like this, and then Bitcoin's going to run into the end of the year. I'm not sure why, for some reason, this triggered so many people. As ever, you don't have to accept this. I'm not trying to push this on anyone. As with any piece of analysis, you can take it or leave it, totally discount it if you want to discount it. But to me, it seemed rather compelling, and it fits my bias that Bitcoin is going to move to the upside. So I guess we'll just see, right? So far, it seems to be holding up. Again, though, if you are one of the people that got triggered by this, by all means disregard it. One thing I am pretty good at gauging though is sentiment, and at the moment I'm seeing a lot of this, a lot of people talking about selling all their gold and blah blah blah, but the reality is a lot of these Bitcoin folks, they never really had gold to start with, right? They were talking about dumping all of their gold and buying Bitcoin with it right at the start of the cycle, and now all of a sudden they're coming out to say, oh, I just sold all my gold and bought more Bitcoin. I don't really think these types of people's opinion carries much weight, for the simple reason that where's their receipts? If they weren't getting long here publicly and trading the thing along the way, if they haven't got the receipts to prove that they were doing that, then just coming up here and saying, well, I'm selling gold and buying more Bitcoin, I don't think we can really put much weight on their opinions. I also see a bunch of traders that have gotten this right and have traded this thing publicly along the way, and I see those people jumping up and down here and saying this is not slowing down, this is going to continue to trend higher for a long time, and it might, but realistically I'm still making the case that this hasn't got much time left. I think this is probably going to top soon. I'm sure it can cover some ground to the upside first. If the 80s or 70s fractal rather is going to repeat, then we may well be a lot higher in just a couple of weeks time. That would kind of speak to all of this FOMO worldwide really building into a crescendo, right? It would get a bunch of the top coolers to finally say, oh, I guess this is a new paradigm, I guess gold's not going to top here. And then once everyone is convinced that the thing's never going to stop, that's when of course we'll get that correction. And of course for a long time on this channel we have often pointed at local tops or weekly cycle tops for gold being the catalyst, or at least the starting point for a Bitcoin rally. And you can see that right here, back in 2024, Bitcoin tops as gold starts to break out to the upside, gold tops as Bitcoin starts to break out to the upside, Bitcoin tops as gold starts to go on a run, then we get the top in gold married up with a breakout to the upside for Bitcoin, and you can see these things practically just take it in turns to rip. Same deal back here in 2020, gold puts in its major top and consolidates for a long time. Meanwhile, Bitcoin goes on this big parabolic push. And so today, with gold's days being numbered, getting ready to break down from what is currently a fourth angle, it seems only reasonable that Bitcoin at the same time may have a chance here at confirming a weekly cycle. I don't really know whether it's got to just blast higher from here or whether it's going to continue to kind of chop around and eke out one final low before it can move higher. But it seems to me like the cycles are still very much in control. There's no real technical damage on this chart yet, and the rest of the world is jumping up and down and giving all kinds of attention to this. Even the Bitcoiners are now saying, oh, I'm selling my gold and buying more Bitcoin, when they spent the prior 3 years laughing at this asset class, calling it a boomer rock, saying that Bitcoin was going to demonetize gold, and now all of a sudden they come out as big gold holders that are dumping their stack to buy more Bitcoin. Man, I don't buy it. Where's your receipts? I do believe this is probably going to be the case, though, in the next couple of weeks when gold tops from its parabola, once every man and his dog is fully exposed in this market and it breaks down. I do think that's going to coincide with Bitcoin mooning higher, and I also think that fits this perfectly. I think by the time gold has fully topped and started to break down, this thing will have moved sideways enough to get into that window where it can start to follow the 90-day offset higher. So again, take it or leave it, right? This is just how I'm looking at the markets right now. And then again, we tie it back here and just say, if true, then hopefully we move to all-time highs before then topping for the 4-year cycle. And if not true, then probably what we'll get, of course, is some kind of lackluster distribution and rollover. And then, right, we're cooked. And altcoins in that, if this is what's going to happen to Bitcoin, altcoins are never going to rally. I still maintain breadth will be thin. Even if we get this for Bitcoin, I still think 99% of those altcoins are not going to do anything. A handful might do well being defined as better returns than Bitcoin for this cycle. But I still think the biggest problem with altcoins this cycle, right, is in years gone by, in prior cycles, these coins were coming out and people genuinely believed they would change finance, right? It was, oh, this is the birth of DeFi, this is smart contracts, this is tokenization of real estate. It was like people were really believed in what they were buying, right? They thought they were buying a piece of the future. Versus this cycle around, people are just buying things because they want to pump and dump them. They think they can buy them ahead of other people and then they can pump them up and sell and dump on other people. No one really believes, even the altcoiners this cycle didn't really believe in the project they're holding, right? They just believed in the pump. And it's a very, very different environment. Not less, of course, because we've got way more institutions this time around. They don't really care about your Doge coins or whatever. At the same time, we've created millions and millions and millions of coins every day, practically the entire way through this cycle. And there's just not enough money in the world to pump all of them. It just is what it is. And whilst everyone is very quick to have been pointing at this Bitcoin and gold ratio, which I did a deep dive on Friday's live stream. If you want to go and watch minutes 4 to 34 in that, you will see just what a compelling case I think there is for this thing bottoming and reversing pretty soon and heading up towards perhaps even as high as 65 ounces. A lot of people have been quick to point at this chart and say, wow, that's a head and shoulders top, it's bearish, right, it's done. Bitcoin priced in gold has proven that it's failed as a store of value and blah, 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 blah. But the reality is, okay, when you flip this chart the other way around, it's got such a long way to go before any gold bugs can really start saying that it's taken down Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is still smoking this thing. Bitcoin is still the apex predator asset. And I don't care how bullish you've been on gold or how right you've got this trade, which, let's be honest, most people did not get this trade right at all, the gold trade. But if you are one of the few that got it right, you can't objectively look at this and say, well, here we go, right? This comes next. It just doesn't make sense. Not with the current state of the parabola for gold, not with the fact Bitcoin is consolidating around all-time highs and everything else, right? After we've had the biggest liquidation in history, I don't think this is the smart bet. And if you're wondering where we're going to get this Bitcoin strength from, I am still kind of pointing at this power law, which I do believe will break at some point, right? Probably after the QE bomb late next year. But in the meantime, I do think we can get one final pop to 150 to maybe as high as 200k by the end of the year, especially if the stock market keeps blowing off and FOMO really, really builds into a crescendo, especially if gold can top, like I said, and we can see that kind of rotational trade. Again, let's be very clear about that. Not rotating physical gold into Bitcoin. I don't think the central bank's going to sell at all. I'm just saying we get the gold market top, as it has done historically, coincide with a big push for Bitcoin. At the same time, John Bollinger is doing the rounds on Twitter at the moment because last time he said it was time to pay attention was at this low before we got a big 70% push for Bitcoin. And he just came out and said that we've got more compression at the hard right edge and it's soon going to be time to pay attention. So again, another kind of double-ish from here would put us well over 150k, maybe towards 200k if we're lucky, we'll see. And again, fitting in with this theme that there's not a great deal of time left, we've got Moody's and other rating agencies coming out to reassure everyone we're going through the 7th inning stretch. Most people are still going to be quick to point at GDP. If you take away the whole AI stuff, GDP growth was just 0.1% in the first half of 2025. So AI is no doubt in one of the biggest bubbles we've ever seen at the moment. It continues to be so bad that the best thing it can achieve is just making stuff up. Again, feel free to disregard this information, but I think all of this kind of fits very, very nicely into the base case on this channel. So moving into a few charts, obviously not much has changed since the weekend's deep dive. Gold is still pushing up, okay? There's still a lot of premature top callers. I'm just going to say this. It's amateur to call a top here. Why? Because there's no breakdown. We must have not only a breakdown, but a confirmed breakdown before we can even entertain calling tops and going short. Even then, the risk is still high that we get some kind of breakdown here, okay? Some kind of retest, some kind of bigger order correction, and then it just turns up, okay? So don't be jumping in front of any trains. Don't be an amateur. You can't call the top, okay? You don't know anything. There's no point trying to catch a falling knife to the upside. What was the expression one of the members told me? Catching the tail of a rocket if it's the upside, something like that. I don't know. Anyway, don't be an amateur, okay? You don't know where the top is because it's driven by randomness and chaos. So wait for your breakdown, wait for it to be confirmed, then we can talk seriously about finding some tops. For the stock market, so far, all logic would dictate we've got to have a couple of weeks of flush and decline here. However, when you look at the futures, they are currently still ticking up. So if we're going to confirm a bottom here, then we're also going to confirm we're absolutely in a blow-off top. And we're going to be mooning to the upside into the end of the year, which kind of takes the Q1 probability drastically lower. And for Bitcoin so far nothing more than a counter trend bounce. The cycle is still down. Now we could easily invert here and just blast off, but for that to even be a possible scenario, we've got to get a true breakout. If we can get a true breakout, remember, this would just be breakout, hard retest, and then resumption higher. Okay, now I don't really think we should be betting on an inversion here. I think the cycle could still chop around for a few more days. This whole thing then would still just be like a continuation of a Dalai Lama. In fact, let's check the Dalai Lama chart. Well, needless to say, taken way longer than expected, this is still a valid pattern. Okay, this has still not breached the low, at least on Bybit. I'm sure, depending on what exchange you use, it has breached the low. But if we continue just to chop around sideways and then emerge without taking out that low, then it is still a valid pattern, even though it'd be quite jank. For now, it's simply a case of giving the cycle enough time to finish resetting itself, and then we get to have an answer. Okay, is it lower high in distribution? Are we cooked? Or is there one final high into the end of the year? As ever, I still think we can champion a big move to the upside here, especially if we can confirm that this is indeed a lower high for the Dixie and we're going to start to roll over and look for a fake breakdown to invert the 3-year cycle. Still telling that to the bond market. Looking for a counter trend bounce here. Nothing too extreme, just what I'm hoping for, and then hopefully we can get a better entry on TLT. I see a bunch of you chomping at the bit for that, but I'm in no rush there as ever. Plenty of time. Don't expect it to really start moving until we get to a bit later next year. So I'm your boy Camel. Welcome to the week. Welcome to Monday. I wish you all well. Trade safe out there. Take it one day at a time. Keep that risk managed and demand receipts from these influencers telling you they sold gold at the top, right? Like, where's your evidence? Anyway, I'm your boy Camel. Peace.
Camel Finance, he's the man to see. Rocking the markets with his contrarian spree. Trades like a pro, no fear, no shame. Sticking to his guns in his money game. He's a badass, oh yes indeed. Camel